because the Davon method is pretty cool. Like I really enjoyed this because it's so encompassing of everything. So there's a few points to this. So we're going to go over the points and deep dive into each one. So the first one is being conscious of relationship patterns, which inherit from childhood, which again, I'm enjoying deep diving into that. The second one is contacting, my writing is terrible, contacting your deeper self, like you're being present and conscious, unleashing chemistry. Then we've got geometry, which again, dancing together in the stage of relationships, which again, I didn't know there was stages of relationships, so that was cool. And then cultivating your sexual potentials. Let's just sort of deep dive into these. So this first one, being conscious of relationship patterns that are inherent from childhood. What is this all about? Because a lot of the podcast guests that I have on, a lot of this stuff's come back to childhood. Welcome to the Prime Life Project podcast, a place to help you unlock your full potential, both mentally and physically, to become the best version of you. Welcome back to an episode of the Prime Life Project podcast. I'm your host, Daniel James, and today I have got a fantastic treat for you. We're going to be talking about relationships and romance, and it's something that I myself, for long-time listeners, you will know that I am tragic when it comes to relationships and romance. So I feel like this is going to be more of an episode for me, but I know that a lot of people are going to be able to relate to this as well. So my guest today is Alicia Davon, who, along with her husband, Erwan, has become the go-to experts for people seeking high-level relationship support since 2003. Alicia specializes in supporting singles in getting into passionate and successful relationships. That's the key thing here for me, I think, and helping couples take their relationships to new heights of romance and intimacy. Alicia provides a high-end boutique service that gives her clients an effective way to enhance their relationships, and she and Erwan offer all of their coaching and classes online to support people all over the world. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
No, I'm really looking forward to this. Like I said, I think it's, again, doing research into you, it's not just one area that you work on. You've got this complete holistic approach to when it comes to relationships and romance. So I think my listeners, whether they're in a relationship or about to get into a relationship, I think the value that you can provide is going to help a lot of people here in general. But before we go down this rabbit hole, how did you get into this space? Can you take my audience back? Because again, it's a bit of a unique place to be in the market. So how did this all come about?
Yes. Well, of course, like most things, it was a journey that I never could have predicted. I mean, I was starting in probably fourth grade or fifth grade, obsessed with relationships and boys, starting with my neighbor that lived 2 doors down. His name was Chris. And I would go play on this little grass hill near his house and hope he would come out. And, I was always just distracted really by boys and relationships. And that's what I loved. And so fast forward, I went to college and got into therapy myself, was starting to learn more and more about myself. I was studying psychology and then went to graduate school to become a therapist because I had been in therapy. And when something helps you so much, sometimes you have that inclination to go out and help other people, right? So I was really lit up and getting more of a sense of who I was outside of, my childhood and my parents' house and everything, and becoming the woman that I am. And about 2/3 of the way through my master's program, where I was studying to become a therapist, I was finding myself really, really interested in female sexuality, relationships, obviously, and how that all kind of goes together with psychology. And this woman in my program, who's still one of my best friends today, her name is Shayna, and she said to me, "Hey, Alicia, I just met this man. His name is Erwan, and he teaches these classes all about romance and spirituality and sex. And you got to meet this guy. You're going to love him." So I said, "Take me to this guy. He sounds perfect." And long story short, there's many funny stories of how we got together and everything, but we started dating. And I asked if I could visit one of the classes he was teaching. And it was called the Pleasure Course. And I thought I would just go and sit on the sidelines and kind of watch him teach. But no, he actually put me into the workshop. So I'm sitting in this group of people in his living room in this big house that he lived in this workshop, suddenly addressing my own love life and romantic life. And the thing that I really loved about it was that there was deep work, right? There was the deep work, looking at ourselves, looking at our pasts, but also it was fun. And we were talking about romance and sexuality with such sophistication. And I was like, this is really cool. So when it was over, I'm like, sorry, you're stuck with me. I'm going to join your organization. I abandoned the therapy idea. I did finish my master's, but decided to work with him instead.
I think that's good though, because it's like you've got the therapy background, but then you're doing something really that you're passionate about and you care about from such a young age. So it's just amazing how the universe works. Because again, you hear this, like my audience may have listened. It's like, so you've got this bloke that's teaching a sexuality class and a relationship, and straight away people have got this like, what, a man can do that? But yes, they can. A man that's really in tune with their energy, they absolutely can. But it's such a unique thing to find in somebody. So I'm not surprised you kind of jumped on that opportunity, and then from there, obviously, like it's just sort of grown. I think you've hit on a few important things already, which we're obviously going to delve into. But one of the biggest things I think is people, when it comes to relationships, someone told me this a while ago, and it's really resonated with me, is that the problem with most relationships is you've got someone that's a little bit broken, quote unquote broken, no one's really broken, but not really know themselves. And then potentially someone that has got themselves, so you've got a small circle and a big circle. The big circle comes in, essentially eats a small circle up. And then that person then becomes dependent on them. When really what it should be is two people that know each other, they know about themselves, they know what they like, dislike, etc., etc., and they kind of come together, create an even more beautiful whole circle, and then when they separate, they're back to themselves again. But fundamentally, people don't tend to really know themselves. So let's kind of deep dive into this bit, because the Davon method is pretty cool. Like I really enjoyed this because it's so encompassing of everything. So there's a few points to this. So we're going to go over the points and deep dive into each one. So the first one is being conscious of relationship patterns which inherit from childhood, which again, I'm enjoying deep diving into that. The second one is contacting, my writing is terrible, contacting your deeper self, like you're being present and conscious, unleashing chemistry. Then we've got geometry, which again, dancing together in the stage of relationships, which again, I didn't know there was stages of relationships, so that was cool. And then cultivating your sexual potentials. Let's just sort of deep dive into these. So this first one, being conscious of relationship patterns that are inherent from childhood. What is this all about? Because a lot of the podcast guests that I have on, a lot of this stuff's come back to childhood. I don't think people really understand how important their childhood is when it comes to relationships. So can we talk about that a little bit? Like, why is this so important?
Yes. So to give a little bit of context, right before I dive into the consciousness piece, you laid out the Davon method. So what the Davon method is, it's our method to support both singles and couples in having that juicy, successful, passion-filled relationship life that we all want, whether you're single and looking for that, or you're in a relationship and you'd really like it to either stay that way or get more like that again or whatever. And we've discovered these 5 very important pieces that are necessary to have a relationship thrive. Most people don't know about this, and we didn't either. The only reason we know is because we've been studying psychology. You know, Erwan used to live in a Zen monastery and was the director of a yoga ashram and trained to teach seminars all over the world. So through our own experience and training is how we came to the Davon method. We've been teaching it together for 20 years. So the first piece that you mentioned, we call consciousness of your relationship patterns, which has everything to do with really seeing what you are bringing into the relationship, usually unconsciously. I mean, it really is important. By age 3, we're kind of mostly baked, which is really interesting. The experiences that we have when we're really young with our caregivers, our parents, our teachers, our whatever, that shapes our view of the world. And so we don't usually know this, like, oh, I'm being shaped right now by that my mom was 2 hours late picking me up from school and I felt abandoned and alone. And, you know, you just started sort of look at the world through, oh my gosh, nobody sees me, I'm forgotten. And then you walk around with that feeling, and then you interact in your relationships like that. And it gets reinforced. Some of us have had more severe things happen than just, you know, our mom showing up late. You know, I mean, our families divorcing or abuse or just things that happened on the schoolyard that were pretty damaging and that kind of thing. We've all had rough things happen to us. So the thing to know is those things affect us. And if we don't become aware of that, then we just go from relationship to relationship, carrying that along with us. You know, often they're wounds senses of feeling alone or feeling not enough or feeling like you can't trust or that people always leave or you have to be really, really nice to get people to like you, or you have to be in control and bossy, or you don't get what you want, or you need to avoid because everything's too scary. We all have these ways that we get when we feel threatened. So bringing consciousness just means bringing light to that. It doesn't mean you have to change it. People are kind of often feeling like I have to fix these things about myself. No, you can't. You're human. They are baked into you. But bringing awareness loosens the grip on you. You're not so thrown to act certain ways. I mean, you ever kind of find yourself in relationship being like, that one just ended the same way all of them end, or man, I have the same relationship, they're not available, or, they're just not good enough. All of that is related to the patterning. So we want to bring awareness to it.
How do you go about bringing that awareness to it? Because there's some people, again, they like to play the victim. What I mean by that is it's always the partner's fault. And again, I've had friends like this where it's always this other person. And you just sat there and you're like, it's the same pattern over and over again. You try and explain it to them and they're not open to it. So obviously I know the first part is the person has to be open, but how do you go about actually recognizing and getting people to recognize and unpick these patterns?
So the first thing, it's a really good question. Now, blaming others is a sure sign that you're not being responsible for yourself, and hence you don't have power in the relationship. So I'm not saying it's wrong. I mean, a lot of people walk around blaming people, blaming their parents, blaming the government, blaming everybody. Okay, you can do that. It robs you of your power though, because a lot of those things are out of your control, like what the other person does, or how your parents were growing up, or that you had to immigrate from a country in the middle of your childhood. And, whatever it is that happened, it happened, right? And I'm not saying that to be callous. We have deep feelings about those things. But if you blame and use them as excuse for why relationships don't work out, it's just you don't have power, okay?
Yep.
So there are certain inquiries to become aware of these relationship patterns. Erwan and I call it your relationship blueprint. And in our classes, we guide people through all sorts of inquiries because as human beings, we're usually not aware, right? We're just like, why is this still happening to me or something? So you just, some inquiry questions could be, what's something that people say about me regularly that I get upset by, or what's something from my childhood that was particularly upsetting that seems to repeat? What patterns are repeating in my relationship life? You just kind of want to have an open inquiry, and doing it with support is really nice because we really hide these things from ourselves. We have this weird ability as human beings to not see what's right in front of us.
Yep.
But there's, so inquiry is the answer. And then there's certain inquiries that are nice. You just start to see it. And then eventually, when you develop that awareness, you can start to see it arising in the moment in a situation with somebody. And then you have a choice.
That's the big thing, is a choice. Like, it's just giving people a choice. The whole awareness of life in general. Once you become aware of these things, you then give yourself a choice. I think the key thing with this as well is like being kind to yourself when you're like inquiring about what's going on, because people can be really harsh and negative towards themselves, can't they? When you start to turn inwards and you try and do some of this work, especially if you have to accept responsibility. It's very hard to accept that you're responsible for your part in all of these past relationships failing, and they can cause people to have that negative cascade of, well, I'm a failure, I'm this, I'm that. It's like, no, just do it with a little bit of compassion. Like I said, we're all human beings. Like no one's perfect. So I think it's like just becoming like a bit more aware and kind of yourself goes a long, long way, because again, people like to beat themselves up, which is never a good place to be. The relationship blueprint thing, that was a big thing for me that I found, because I was repeating a lot of the same patterns. And as you said, once you become aware of it, you give yourself back control. How long do you find it takes people from becoming consciously aware of this sort of stuff to actually going through the dating process and noticing it, if that makes sense? Because it's all well and good in theory. So they're working with you and they're like, oh yeah, so I do this and this. Do they then go straight into their next date and are aware of it? Or do they still keep stumbling, if that makes sense? Is it quite an instant change, or does it take a bit of time?
It really ranges. And something you brought up a minute ago, I call it the inner critic, that critical voice. That actually has a lot, handling that, addressing that has a lot to do with how quick, quote unquote, the process goes. A really big part of the work that we do is how to handle that inner critic, because it really is our worst enemy. I mean, it's like the reason we don't want to see how we may have contributed to the failure of lots of relationships is that then the inner critic comes in and is like, and you suck. And, and then it's like, okay, now I'm just dead on the floor. I can't do anything. So learning how to disengage from that inner critic is a really important skill. And so if you can, it really can be quick or it can take a while. And the key is kindness. The key is, maybe you become aware of like, oh, I push people away unconsciously, and then you end a date where you just told the person that you thought was really hot that like, you're not interested, but then you were like, why did I say that? You could be like, oh, I did that. Okay, I did that. Let me feel that. Like, what? Oh, wow. I feel like this tight feeling in my chest and like this fear and like, I want it, but I don't. And interesting. Wow. And you just kind of feel, and then that makes it more likely that next time when the person's like, hey, that was fun, would you like to do it again, you feel that same clenching in your chest. Oh, here I am about to go into my pattern. And you can just eke out the like, yes, I'd like to. Like it's just step by step. It doesn't have to take forever. Right.
But I like that though. Like I said, it's once you notice, become aware of that voice. Again, we spoke about that on previous podcasts. Well, like it becomes a bit of a game, because once you notice it, you start to be like, why did I do that? And it becomes a bit of a game rather than it being this catastrophization of I'm a failure,
Yes.
X, Y, and Z. Very, very powerful. And this ties nicely into the second point of this method, which is contacting your deeper self. Again, this whole thing about consciousness. This is a really big, powerful thing, which kind of ties into this voice inside the head, et cetera, et cetera. So what does this actually look and feel like then? Because this is one of the biggest things I believe, that in modern day society, we are not present. Like we are busy worrying about things that we have done, mistakes we've made, or worrying about future things that we can't control. It's very, very rare nowadays that people walk around in a present state. So how does this look and feel then for people?
I think you're right about that. It's very common to walk around the world caught in our heads, caught in our patterns, right? Caught in the patterns that we were just talking about. And once you become aware of like, oh, wow, I have a pattern of feeling less than other people, or I have to protect myself from everybody. And, oh, that's my pattern. That's not who I am. Oh, well, who am I? What is this? Like, it opens up this inquiry of, wow, who am I really? To be present to who you are, not all the thoughts of who you are, who you should be, or what other people think. Okay. So that's presence. And Erwan and I find that practices are what really help a person tap into really feeling themselves. People listening might be like, myself, aren't I this, man or woman that is 35 and goes to work? And sure, those are all part of your identity. But what we mean by contacting who you really are is like your deeper self. There's a lot of words for it. Some people like religious words, like the God within you, or being, or Buddha, or maybe your soul, or your presence, or your spirit, or something, right? You can get the feeling. I think everybody truly does know that this is really who we are and what we are. But living as that is a whole other thing, because there's these distractions and these patterns, right? So practices can be really helpful. Like meditation is a really great practice that we train all of our students in. It doesn't mean you need to sit in full lotus and be in some position. You can sit in a comfortable chair and just be and close your eyes and feel and let the thoughts flow. We recommend body practice, which is any kind of practice where you're moving your body. Maybe it is some kind of exercise, or you're walking out into your backyard and just feeling the wet grass between your toes, or you're walking on the beach. But anything that brings us in, as a practice is how we recommend getting in touch with that. And as far as how it feels, I mean, it feels all sorts of ways. Sometimes people report when they're kind of free of some of those nagging thoughts and distractions, there's a sense of peace or calm or groundedness. Sometimes in the process of becoming present, it can feel a little like, whoa, I've got all these emotions and body sensations I wasn't feeling because I was so distracted. So you feel that, go through that. So it can feel all sorts of ways.
I think it's very interesting. Like I said before on the podcast, like meditation is one of the key things that I said to help me save my life. Like actually learn to meditate properly. And again, I went to like a Buddhist center to really sort of take the practice to another level, like actually learning to do it properly. And then once I do let that practice slip, because again, I'm human. So sometimes, you let it slip. The difference in how I feel up inside my own thoughts is bizarre. Again, once you're aware of what's going on, that's all meditation is. Like people think it's about turning your brain off. It's not about turning your brain off. It's just about becoming aware of your thoughts. So you can actually see all the BS that's just flying around and how completely random it is. And it's just so freeing when you actually experience that. And then it's like when you eat healthy. So you eat healthy, you clean, your body feels amazing. And if you go back to eating all the junk food, you notice your body feels sluggish and slow. It's the same thing with your mind. And again, anyone that hasn't practiced meditation yet, I strongly recommend. There's loads of apps out there. Like there's free resources everywhere. Just take 5 minutes to practice. And again, as you were saying that, you don't have to sit down this crazy lotus. I can't sit in a lotus thing. Like I was sat there in this little meditation stool at the Buddhist center. So I sit on a meditation stool. And again, I'm the most unflexible person. But linking back with this again, with the being present and conscious in terms of relationships. Why do you think that most people aren't their true authentic selves in relationships from the start? Because I feel like this is one of the biggest things. And this for me has been a game changer when I go on to dates. Now, this is a bizarre thing for me. Again, my past is I used to be a bit of a lad, go on loads of dates, a bit of a womanizer, but I was always showing up as a different version of me because again, my own insecurities and trying to seek validation. But for me, I'm dating as a new version of me. It sounds bizarre because I actually know myself. Now, when I'm on dates, it is bizarre. So why do you think most people kind of hide themselves on a date? Because it's going to come out eventually. And I think that tends to be a catalyst why relationships fail, because you're a year into the relationship and that mask's fallen off and you're a bit like, oh, we've got a house now, we're kind of stuck together. So yeah, why do you think people aren't their true authentic selves?
Well, there's generally not a lot of support for that from the start. It goes back to those patterns that we talked about. We, through no fault of our parents or their parents or whatever, the culture, we don't have to blame anybody here, but there just tends to be, oh, be like this, don't be like that, cover this up, present yourself like this. And then there's media and movies and all sorts of things influencing us, and then we get caught up in like how we're supposed to be. And tips and tricks, I mean, I like tips and tricks, we obviously offer those, but not to the exclusion of presence and being who you are, right? So I think that people, we just don't know how, or there hasn't been a lot of support for that.
I think for me, anyone that's listening to this that again can relate to my story about that, one of the best things ever is actually showing up on a date as your true self and being like, this is me. I know myself. It's bizarre. I can't really describe it in any other way, because before you almost feel like you're not being authentic, but as you said, you don't know that you're not, if that makes sense. It just feels a bit like I'm tricking this person. But no. Like just be authentic. And it's the whole thing from the get-go just feels so much smoother, because again, it saves a lot of time, because literally 3 weeks in, you realize this person isn't for me. Because what I've started to notice now is people's energies towards me. Whereas before I wouldn't have noticed that. But now I'm like, I'm on this level here. And after maybe 3 or 4 dates, I'm like, this person's energy doesn't quite line up with mine. Okay, cool. You can then have a decent conversation on a level and it's fine. So it just completely changes the dating game.
Yes, it really does.
Next point. I love this one. Unleashing chemistry. So
yes.
Again, chemistry, again, is one that I think was some research into. You mentioned that chemistry is the number one complaint about people's romantic lives. So what is this chemistry and how do we unleash it?
I love this question. So we all are familiar with whether we call it chemistry or the spark or the vibe. It's like you go on a date and it's like, did you feel it or did you not feel it? Right? We all know what that is. Or we're in a new relationship and we're just like, oh, the person can do no wrong. We're like so excited to see them. The sex is amazing. That feeling that you get. So let's just call that chemistry. It's polarity, energy, sexual energy, sensual energy, right? So many people feel that once they start dating somebody that they've decided, okay, I'm going to approve of this person. I like them. I like how they look. They turn me on. Okay. Woo. And you just feel it. Once people have been together for a certain amount of time, that tends to fade. The novelty wears off, the newness wears off, and people find themselves kind of not feeling as excited and turned on. And then they think, well, something must be wrong with the relationship. Or they think, well, this is just what happens, right? It's fun in the beginning and then it gets kind of boring, but I like this person, I'm getting older. I'll just stick with them, whatever. They're a good life partner. It doesn't have to be like that. I mean, this is the number one reason that people that are couples come to work with us. They're like, where's the passion? Also, though, singles are often coming to us saying, I'm not meeting anybody that I am attracted to. I don't feel it. There's no spark. Few people know that you can actually deliberately create chemistry in the way that you interact with the person. It's not, it kind of seems like in the beginning it rains down on you and it's there. But you actually can do things to create chemistry. I want to go back to something that you said about the being your authentic self while dating. I'm in 100% support of that, obviously. And there's something to watch out for, which is sometimes people think, well, if I'm going to be my authentic self dating, that means on my first date, I'm just going to be like, hi. And like, I'm really nervous. And I have this like trauma from my childhood that I'm still healing from. And like, my mom has cancer and I'm really sad. And like, that's heavy stuff I just brought up, right? There's also something to be said about the stages of relationship. Like I hate the word appropriate, but like what you kind of want to do on a first date. It's not the time to do that. It doesn't mean you're being inauthentic, but you want to be attuned to the situation of like, hey, I'm checking this person out. They're checking me out. Let me not be fake, but let me flirt with them, for let me compliment her on her earrings and how they match her eyes and she looks gorgeous. Let me, we're walking into a restaurant, support her back with a light touch as we walk through the door. Let me, there's skills you can learn that actually create chemistry. So that if you're either nervous on a first date or you've been in a relationship for a long time, there are ways. There's a lot of other things I could say about building chemistry in a long-term relationship, which we can get to. But I just want to pause here because I just said a lot of stuff.
No, but that's really, really key there, especially when you said about the being authentic, but not being too vulnerable. Because I remember, again, this was a long time ago, pre-Mikey, had a relationship expert on, and basically saying that dating is just information gathering. That's what it should be. It's not I love you. And again, same thing. You're not, here's all my baggage. It's not the time or the place. So you're being authentic, but you're not being completely vulnerable because again, you don't know this person. And just because you're showing up as your true authentic self, you don't know what they're presenting. They could be a massive narcissist. And if you just unload all your issues and things, that's like, do you know what I mean? That's just like a red flag to a bull. So again, you've got to keep your guard up, but again, be authentic, be true to yourself. Just again, as you said, time and a place, read the situation. First date is not the time to unload all these deep things because again, you may never see that person again. So really, really key there. So I think the building chemistry is a massive, massive thing. And again, creating, we say that the physical touch is a big thing there. Because again, on a first date, I always got taught, I think I read it in a book somewhere, like Men's Health, probably doing the stupid columns about when you're trying to read a woman. It's like, if they're touching you like your hand or something, then that's a good sign. Do people do that deliberately, or is that a body's natural reaction if there is, quote unquote, this spark in chemistry?
So I would say both. Physical touch, like breaking that physical touch barrier, is one of the the steps to flirting and seduction. Now, of course, you want to be sensitive. You're not grabbing someone's butt. You're not like, you don't, right. And these days, especially, we have to be like really sensitive to all of that. But there's little ways that you can kind of flirt with the person. You compliment, let's say, a man to a woman, right? You can compliment her like, oh, wow, those are really pretty earrings. And then if she responds positively, like, oh, thanks, I got them at this, blah, blah, blah. You can kind of cup them in your hands and look at them. That's a very minor physical touch. If she doesn't back away, right, then you're like, okay, she kind of liked that, right? And then maybe as a woman, he says something and you think it's funny and like, oh, that's so funny. And you just kind of touch him on his knee and then you back. There's these little like micro gestures that are totally inoffensive,
yep.
but break the physical touch barrier. And so you're not kind of in that funny situation where you haven't touched all night and you've been kind of shy and then you go in for the arm around her or something and then it's super weird and awkward. No,
we've all been there.
Yeah, right?
Mikey's laughing in the background. I think we've all been there.
Micro gestures, it's the same as if you haven't even approached the person yet, like you're sitting at a bar, let's say, whatever, typical example, and you see some person you want to talk to. You don't hop on the stool next to them and be like, hi, can I buy you a drink? If that person is like, no thanks, or like they're waiting for their partner or whatever, then you're kind of like stuck on that stool. And like heartbroken, right? It's like better to be like, hey, what's up? Cheers, and then if they positively move, oh, cheers. Hey, what's your name? You just want to know how to have that kind of socializing skill. So you get a read. It's all about getting little reads moving forward.
It's like I said, it's like a physical conversation, really. Like we're talking, I'm talking, you're responding positively back. So I'm like, oh, cool, we're building a bit of rapport here. So again, same with like the physical stuff. Like if her body language is closed off straight away, you're like, she's not really feeling it. But if seems very relaxed, then clearly you're making them feel relaxed. I think it's a key thing there. It's like just reading the situation physically, and again, listen to what they're saying. I think people have lost the art of listening. Just listen to the words they're saying, because again, they'll be giving you subconscious like cues, and then you can then sort of build onto it. So again, a little bit on rapport there. I did a course recently. It's all about building rapport and like the linguistics and how people talk. It's absolutely like crazy what people will actually give you when they're talking if you're paying attention for it.
Right. The information is there, and if you're unsure, there's things you can do to kind of get the information, right? If you kind of say, oh, wow, like, nice earrings. And she kind of gives you a frozen neutral response. And you're like, did she like that? Did she not? Just try again with something else, and see if she, right? So it's presence. It all comes down to paying attention and presence.
Love that. So these were some really key points. What I said. So just a quick recap here. Like first one's becoming conscious of patterns, which again, really, really key one. Then contacting your deeper self, again, about presence and consciousness. Unleashing chemistry. Next one, choreography. Dancing through the stage of relationships. Now, this for me, I didn't even realize this was a thing, because apparently there's different stages, and apparently people can struggle at different stages. So, funny story. I'm going to tell him I said this. One of my coaches, a guy called Charlie, we call him second date Charlie, because he can't get past the second date stage. So he's clearly in the stage of relationships. He gets the first date. It's the second date where it all goes wrong. So again, that's clearly the stage of relationship. So what kind of stages are there in relationships? Because I didn't really know this was a thing.
Yeah. So most of us were not given a roadmap to how to have relationships succeed. We kind of bumble our way, and some of us get lucky or whatever. We've had enough experience that something works out. That's great. Erwan and I have designed a set of stages of relationship and skills to go with each of the stages. So I'll lay out the stages first, and then I'll give you some of the skills. It would take forever to go through all of them in detail, but I
want people to actually be doing stuff with you as well. So I said, yeah, give us as much information as possible, but there's going to be so much here. I said, this. I was reading, I thought, there's no way. And obviously, again, I know we're tight on time as well, but it's like, it's so hard to really dig deep into all of these points, because each one in and of itself could be a podcast. And that's why I kind of just wanted to sort of just skip through them a little bit, skip a bit of the flavor. And then at the end, we'll find out what people can get more, learn more from you guys. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but yeah, different stages.
Yes. So the first thing I want to say is that people who are in a relationship and listening right now, when I start to go through the stages, they might be like, oh, I don't need to know about the dating stage. you do need to know, because these skills are cumulative. One of the biggest problems in a long-term relationship is that we forget the stuff from the earlier stages, the flirting and the fun. So just keep your ears open, everybody here. So we talked a little bit about flirting, and maybe I'll use the word seduction. Some people like that, some people don't, but that's how you kind of get into relationship, right? That's how you get from not knowing someone to dating them, or being a friend and dating. So let's say you're dating. Erwan and I like to call this stage new and exciting, because that's really the thriving version of this. Is it's new, it's exciting. So the vibe of it is like fun, right? It's fun. It's not depth and serious. It's fun. So the skills include things like, well, knowing how to have fun, like you would know to take your date, maybe not to a very charged political lecture on the first date or second date, but you take them ice skating or rock climbing. Or Erwan used to take me to this sushi place near our house where we lived before, with red velvet walls and Japanese anime, on the screen, and these interesting sushi rolls. And, it was fun and kind of sensual. And paying attention to the woman or the feminine's appetites, like what she wants, and knowing how to turn each other on. So there's like a vibe of fun and turn on, and they're actually skills that you can learn. Some people are really good at that naturally. They're great daters. They're always having dates, but others of us are sort of better in the later stages when it comes to depth and vulnerability, but having fun is sort of like, what? I thought this was to lock the person down, right? Yeah. So the second stage is the vibe is more vulnerability and depth, right? So this is, Erwan and I like to call this stage best friends and lovers. It's kind of like what people used to call going steady, or like the person's your girlfriend or boyfriend, or, you're not like committed for life, but you're like really, into them. And the skills there have to do with communication, and interestingly, learning sexual skill, because that's the stage of relationship where the chemistry tends to die down. So you really learn about giving and receiving pleasure and that kind of thing. The third stage is what most people would call either like marriage or a soulmate relationship, or my long-term partner. And we like to call that the eternal date. It's the culmination of the earlier stages and all of those skills, the fun, the flirty, the woman's desire, the communication, the sex skills. And that part of the relationship is marked by commitment, learning to really cherish the person, taking your sexual skill to an expert level. We call it the eternal date. It kind of has a spiritual, eternal quality. It can go into that dimension. This is like potential, right? Not everybody has this. But. So this is a very short version, but those are the three stages, and those skills are cumulative. You want to learn and become facile with all of them. That's what gives a thriving relationship.
I think you're right. I think a lot of people do try and skip steps of things as well. That's, again, very, very dangerous. You want to be going through each stage, actually build it up properly. Like, you don't want to be just on a date and then be like, right, well, actually in a month's time, I'm going to be married. It's like, where's all the rest of the things gone? Like, you can't just skip all these steps.
Well, it was funny. Yeah, because I was that person when I was dating Erwan. My relationships before had gone really fast, right? Like, we'd met, we fell in love, we were really serious, and then it burned out, in like a bunch of months or something. And about maybe a month or so into my dating Erwan, I was having a really great time, and we were being intimate and everything. And everything was great. And then something like went off in my brain. It was like, oh, this is now commitment time. And I went to his house and I sat him down and I said, Erwan, I'd like to have a conversation with you. Really inspiring, right? And he's like, okay. And I was like, I think we need to commit. We're being intimate now. Like, I think let's be in a committed relationship. Let's like really lock it down. And he was so great about it. He's like, Alicia, you are so awesome and beautiful, and I'm loving spending time with you, and I'm open to that, but we're not really ready for that. It's way too early. Why burn this thing out? Let's see what happens and relax. And I was like, see what happens? Like, that's not my MO in relationship. It's control, but I kind of knew he was right. And I decided to trust him and trust myself and just loosen up a little bit, and have fun. And then eventually, a while later, I was like, all right, it's time for an upgrade. And he had to deal with his issues of vulnerability and commitment and stuff. So it's not just a one-way street, but that is an example. I just did not know how to have fun and be light in relationship at all.
But I think it's so funny, isn't it? Because again, the fact you had to trust him because you had been doing this thing this entire time, but it hadn't been working. So you were like, right, well, I've done this before. It's not worked. This guy's telling me I've got to do something different. What I've got to lose. And then actually turned out to be, then he had to do the same sort of thing. Like he had to then work on his, so which is absolutely incredible. Now we've touched on the last point here. We've touched on this quite, we've used the word sexual potential, sexual energies. So I'm really looking forward to this because again, I think this is a conversation where a lot of people don't like to talk about sexual stuff. But again, I think it's such an amazing topic to actually discuss. I think this is also one of the biggest things in relationships. People don't like to talk about sex. And as you've just alluded to there multiple times, you can't get to know your partner, what they like, dislike. You can't go through any sort of advancement in that sexual aspect if you don't actually communicate with it. So cultivating your sexual potential. Talk to me about that because it sounds super exciting. So I want to know all about it.
It's very exciting. I mean, sex, as you were just saying, it's one of those very chargey topics. We get very excited about it. It can be scary. Sometimes we've had negative experiences, and it's the topic people lie about the most.
Yep.
Interestingly. And can be, not at our parties, but at a normal kind of party, you'd rather talk about funerals and death and medical issues than sex, right? It's just one of those things. And that's not a judgment. That's just kind of how we were all raised in the culture, whatever. But when you get with someone and you have the hots for them, that sexual, sensual connection is what sets the relationship apart from friendship and that kind of thing. It's not a should, but I find that many people really want to actually develop skill. I mean, how many funny movies are there about like ridiculous sex conditioning, like American Pie and that kind of thing? Yeah. And right?
That's bizarre. We referenced that in the last podcast.
It's like just so typical,
Yeah.
So, but the fun thing is you can actually get really good, quote unquote, at sex. And that looks like, learning to give and receive pleasure. That looks like knowing how to communicate about sex. And also, we have a sensual technique that we teach called extended orgasm, which is a whole other topic. Not everybody wants that comes to work with us. A lot of people do, but it's really about increasing the pleasure in the body. And it's a really great skill to have if you want the kind of relationship that gets better and better over time in terms of the attraction and the chemistry. It's a really great skill. So we train people in that, and it's in a very safe way and only in certain classes and that kind of thing. So you don't have to, but, we find that it's really the missing piece in a lot of people's relationships because we just didn't learn how to do it.
That is honestly one of the most bizarre things. So I broke up. I don't know if I ever spoke about this on the podcast before, but I broke up with one of my ex-girlfriends, and I was so pissed off that she broke up with me. I was like, I'm going to get so good at sex that you're going to regret this. So then I basically went on a mad one and started reading loads of books. So again, people, I genuinely have read books. Like there's so many good books out there that basically tell you essentially how to have sex. Because I said this on the last podcast, I think, essentially nowadays what sex is just two people using each other to masturbate. That's not sex, but that's essentially what modern society makes it. When you actually learn about yourself and actually understand, as you said, it is a skill, but just because you know how to sleep, again, especially as a male to male to female, just you know how to sleep with one woman does not mean you know how to sleep with every woman. So each time, it's almost like it's like you're a detective, an investigator, and again, you've got to learn that woman's body, and again, vice versa, the woman to the man. You've got to actually feel that person. It's amazing to actually experience it. So again, I'm glad you said that. It's a skill, like it can be learned. So, but you've got to be open to it, and so does your partner. And as you said there, about people lie about sex, don't lie to your partner about sex because again, you can't do anything if it's based on a lie. Anything else you wanted to say about the sexual potential?
Yes. One thing is that most people, when they think sex, they think intercourse, right? PIV sex. And that's really fun and wonderful. And people should have that as much as they want. But I really like expanding the definition to include all sex acts, whether it's oral and manual stimulation. It could even be like making out. It could be energetic sex. I mean, because especially in relationships that go on for a long time, and sometimes people will have kids or jobs and they're busy and their schedules or blah, 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 all those reasons that the chemistry goes down in relationship. And like, you want to get the juices rolling, but one or both people aren't ready necessarily to like hop right into a crazy like intercourse. There are so many other options to connect sensually and sexually with skill, with orgasm, pleasure, all of it. It doesn't have to be intercourse. So I just want to presence that. I mean, as we're saying a lot today, there's a lot more to say about all of it.
But it's really true, isn't it? Because again, you get into relationships. Like, what if your partner, for whatever reason, can't have sex for 6 months for a medical condition or surgery? Like, okay, so then that person then gets abandoned, do they? Like, or you get abandoned. That's not how it should be. As you said, there's loads more things to it. And again, it's bizarre. The more I've sort of gone down this path of my own sexual exploration, you realise that it's not just about the actual act of the penetration. That is what it's made to be. And as I said, two people usually to masturbate, but that is really not what it is. Like, if you actually really expand it back, that's where the gold is. That's where the magic is. And actually, that is really minimal and not really the best part of it once you've got the rest of it lined up. And that sounds bizarre to say, but
oh no, but it's true, and then when you bring, I mean, the reason our method works the way it works is that when you bring the presence and the awareness and the masculine feminine communication, and that it's there's emotional connection, spiritual connection, if you like that. And that's what makes great sex. It's not just the act, right?
Absolutely. Could agree more.
Preaching to the choir here.
So final question here, because obviously I know, again, we want a tight time frame here, because there's one question I wanted to ask and go down a bit of a rabbit hole, but because of time, I'm going to wrap it up with another question. So what is one bit of advice that you would give someone who is trying to bring romance and passion back into their relationship after having kids? So I know this, again, is a massive topic, and it was one of the questions, but because of time, people that listen to this, and as we said, you've kind of just hit on it. So after having kids or other family responsibilities, might not really be feeling it. What's one bit of advice you'd give to someone?
So, and I have personal experience with this. We have a 5.5-year-old, and we, before we had him, we were like, oh yeah, we got this. We've been coaching all these parents, for all these years. And then he came and we were like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was going to be so tired, and, all this stuff that we deal with, right, as parents, or maybe other things like crazy job or family stuff. My number one piece of advice would first, well, I'm going to say two, okay, because they're kind of related.
Amazing.
One is address it, like say it, like, hey, and say it in a loving way, hey, I've noticed we're not being intimate lately, and I noticed, like, you want to bring the issue to consciousness. It's very easy to ignore. And also that helps, like, if one person's frustrated about it, it kind of keeps the person from thinking, well, maybe I should just leave, or maybe I should just cheat on this person or whatever. Like, you don't have to go to that, do what you can in the so just bring it up so it's in awareness. And then you want to literally schedule what Erwan and I like to call pleasure time. And I mean, we have ours scheduled 5 to 6 times a week. It does not have to be that much. Maybe it's twice a week, but like a little bit of time, half hour, 45 minutes, a couple times a week, set aside in your calendar for, it could be sex, it could be sensual touching, it could be talking, it could be just away from logistics, away from kids and work and phones. What to do within that time is a whole other topic. We teach people these different practices you can do and this and that. But that's my advice. Address it and schedule time to be together.
I think that's key, especially we said there about the actually addressing it. Like, just get it out there, get it, just because both of you guys know, like, it's not a big secret. Just get it out there, and then I promise you, it's not as bad and scary as it seems. This has been genuinely incredible. Like I said, I know this has flown by, and like I said, I could speak to you all day about this, and the way that you communicate and articulate some of this stuff, because again, it is quite deep stuff we're talking about, but again, you explain it in such an incredible manner. Where can people find out more information about you and Erwan as well? Like, where's the best place for people to connect with you guys?
So the best place, for everybody who's listening, who's like, yeah, I'd like to know more about working with them or what they offer or how they can help me with my particular issue, any of those things, I'm offering a free love life consultation. So it's a one-on-one conversation with me. It can be on Zoom or on the phone, whatever you want, where you can actually just share with me what's happening with you. And I can give you some suggestions as to how to start to address it. And if it looks like Erwan and I can support you, I will lay out our different programs so you get a sense of what they are. If you want to, you can sign up for them. We have everything is online, so you can work with us from wherever. If you're in the Bay Area, some of our programs are in person too. But we have group programs and coaching and all sorts of things. So the way to set that up, there's two ways, and I'll make sure you have this info for the show notes, but you can literally text our school. The number is 415-308-9580. That's 415-308-9580. I don't know if people are out of the US, but WhatsApp can work for that as well. I'll also give you a link that people can click to set up their Love Life consultation if they don't want to text. You can find us on Instagram. We're at Davon Method. And our website is pleasurecourse.com.
Perfect. I get Mikey to put all that across the bottom of the screen. So again, if you listen to it on Spotify, don't forget, like, Spotify now does the video for our podcast. So what I'll do is I'll get the country code as well. So obviously I used to live in America, so I know that there's a country code. So people that do want to text on WhatsApp, they can do that. And again, all the website and Instagram will be across the bottom. I know you've got to shoot off, so I'll love you and leave you. This has been absolutely incredible. Thank you ever so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. I loved your questions, and thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed myself.